XBRL and are very interested in blockchain as well. So I think it's a topic that is going to be disruptive in both accounting and auditing and AIS, and I think it's a topic we all need to get smart about, and there's a lot of research on, and it's not a topic that's 3 years away, because if you go online or go on to Google and type in most major companies, any of the accounting firms, banks, financial service groups, and type in the word, their name and the word blockchain or XBRL, you're going to find that most of them already have some segue or venue into using it. So, and we're really privileged today to have one of the forefathers of XBRL, Eric Cohen. And I'm going to let Eric give his background, but as early as 1998, he was working with one of the original 4 founders of the consortium for XBRL. And he's been involved in the development of XBRL and XBRL GL and the audit data standard and other things for years, and has been an advocate, a passionate advocate of promoting it, sometimes against the objections of some people who don't want to see it go that fast. But my excitement about it, and Eric's going to talk about some of this, is this idea that possibly XBRL really becomes the data normalizer for auditing blockchain and central databases, and not just distributed databases, because of its ability to harmonize and normalize data. Because every protocol is different, every network is different, but if we have a way that we can harmonize data using a tool like XBRL, that's very powerful. So I'd like to give you his full attention. He is still very involved in the development. He's actually involved with the consortium, with XBRL and ISO, on developing the next phase of it, which will be blockchain XBRL for blockchain. And so I'd like to give Eric a warm welcome. He has the room. I do want to ask my MBA students in here to ask questions and to challenge him. He's a great presenter and always interesting. So, but please ask questions and engage. So let's give him a warm Rutgers welcome.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning.
Excellent. You've seen the coat. It counts for CPE. Now I can take it off. All right. Thank you, Ron. My name is Eric Cohen with Cohen Computer Consulting. Some of you may know that for the last 17 years I was associated with another organization, and you may have heard me say that I began my own business in the early 90s called Cohen Computer Consulting, because at Cohen Computer Consulting we help growing businesses to cope with and benefit from information technology. At Cohen Computer Consulting we turn computer ease into computer ease. And now I'm back to being Cohen Computer Consulting for the first time in 17 years. I am, as Rod said, one of the 4 folks acknowledged as starting this whole mess called XBRL. And I am the nut from which the XBRL GL tree grew, and I will tell you a little bit more. At 10:20, I've got an agenda. We have folks here in the room. We've got, how many of you are advanced master's accounting students in the room? Okay. How many of you are PhDs in the room? Okay, how many of you are here because it's cooler inside than outside? How many of you will not raise your hand no matter what I ask you? Excellent. Great. So let's talk about how we plan to spend our time together. We've had our welcome. We're doing our agenda check. A little bit about the things that brought us to the point we are today. What has brought accounting to where it is, management accounting, internal accounting, auditing, and the like. Talk about how XBRL came together to try and deal with some of those issues. Talk in particular about XBRL-GL. When people think about XBRL, they think first in the United States primarily about 10Qs, 10Ks, and other filings to the U.S. Security and Exchange Commission, of which 10,000 companies starting around 2009 began doing all those filings. Some people, as Rod found out, know that back in 2005, the FDIC and FFIC banking regulators came together to develop a central data repository for banks to do bank call reports. We can talk a little bit about that. So that was that preceded the financial statements, but XBureau is much, much more. I'll share a little bit about that vision and how it came together to deal with those problems. Moving on to XBureau GL and audit data standards, what that is at a detailed level, the way that we go from first transaction to end report. A little bit about blockchain. I'm glad to know that most of you had a session about blockchain basics, because I don't want to rehash that hash blockchain little joke there.
No fun in that.
No pun intended. But I am going to speak a little bit about blockchain, about its application in the space, and again about the prospects of audit trails. Then again, we'll talk a little bit about XBureau and the blockchain, some of the exploration and where that's going, a vision for the future, and where do we go from here. And so I always begin my presentations. How many of you have heard me speak about XBureau before? I've got a couple in the room. Okay, great. So I can't tell that joke. We'll work on others. I always begin every presentation with an invitation, and that's that I hope you will join me as you go off into the world, that we will change the way that business is doing business, that we will in particular make it so that a piece of business information, once it hits any computer, anywhere, never needs to be retyped as it flows through the business reporting supply chain. So that was the vision going back 17, 18 years, at least my vision, and we'll see where we go from here. So let's talk about the events leading us here today. So there's that quote, a piece of business information once entered anywhere into any system, never needing to be retyped. But what is it? The right information to the right people at the right time, and obviously information to the wrong people at no time. Information that can flow frictionlessly with as few barriers except where they need to be. Variable comfort on that data. People who want to be an auditor in the future. You want to be an auditor, okay. I am a recovering auditor, thank you very much. And so very, very important. How do we make sure that we can continue to find and provide value, and using people where they're the most valuable, using machines where they're very valuable as that moves forward. So relevant, reliable, real time, replacing the old 3 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic. So here is a vision. But let me read you a quote, slightly reworded, that says, "The lot of the accountant today is by no means a happy one, for in a manufacturing environment where modern progressive methods are employed, he or she is engaged in one long, hopeless struggle to meet demands for information using techniques which are no more adapted to today's IT environment than a system of horse cars would to meet the transportation needs of New York City. Something's radically wrong with accounting today, and it should be kept in mind. Basic defects cannot be corrected by tinkering with surface details." Ron, does this describe the environment that you were part of in your former life? So I'm going to tell you the source of this quote, it isn't like me. But it does lay down an issue that I think speaks to the environment today. In particular, auditors, how are we going to prepare for more types of assurance on more topics in more depth, more rapidly than ever before, in an environment that's becoming increasingly more complex. Those of you who will be in management accounting, those of you who will serve in any such role, we need new things that will revolutionize the way that we do work. But let me take you back. Do you know the name Luca Pacioli? Did you teach them about good old Luca? All right. 1494, Summa da. By the way, I am going to do a butchering job of many different languages during our hour and a half together. And some of you may speak those languages, and I will begin with my abject apology for that. Summa de arithmetica geometria proportioni, proportionalat, yeah, that one. This is the book where double entry bookkeeping was first formalized for the first time. Now, if you're a historian, you may say that it was actually first encapsulated by a guy named Benedetto Petrugli, and that he didn't get to publishing before Luca did, but Luca, therefore, because of this double entry, is known as the father of modern accounting. So let me take you to 1921 and sort of the birth of the management accounting movement, and a guy named G. Charter Harrison. And you remember that quote? The lot of the accountant of today is by no means a happy one, for a plant with progressive manufacturing methods are employed, engaged in one long hopeless struggle to meet demands for information with techniques. That's from 1921. And we have worked to adapt, we have worked to change. The management accounting world was spurred on by this thought and trying to come up with new tools and techniques. And yet, like I say, I think that that quote is still very valid today. Let's move into the 1960s. And a gentleman named, an academician, an esteemed academician named George H. Sorter. And in the 1960s, he said this. He said, if you look at financial statements, which is a primary tool where management talks to their stakeholders, there's a lot of summarization goes on, there's a lot of estimation that goes on, valuation that goes on, decision-making goes on, and it's not necessarily the decisions or estimates or values that the stakeholder would want to make if they had the underlying information of their choice. So rather than today's reporting, as we still follow it, what we need to do is we need to give people the actual underlying events. And to begin that tie into blockchain, what are people saying that blockchain is? The blockchain is the log with all the information of the underlying events. So we began to say, maybe what was impossible in 1960 starts to become possible today, because the things that to aggregate or not to aggregate, that is the question, whether it is more transparent in the mind, provide the events of underlying detail for stockholders to make outrageous fortunes, or to summarize the sea of troubles and by value report them. Little Shakespearean value here. There's a bunch of hurdles that were there in the 1960s to make that practical. Things like most people didn't have the power of supercomputers sitting at their side. So not a lot of computers in 1960. The PC coming about in 1980s, early 80s, and then moving, getting better. Storage. When I started, 360K was a wonderful thing. We said, I don't know, will I ever be able to fill a 20 megabyte hard drive? And now we have gigabytes on our phone. We've got hundreds of gigabytes. We've got petabytes, triggerbytes, chiggerbytes, mosquito bytes, all those bytes. So storage, the ability to share information from anywhere to anywhere. And again, throwing blockchain and distributed ledger technology as an important there. Standards to be able to span across different things and bring them together, one lifeblood of information. The analytics, the services, and each one of these things between the 1960s and now are going away. We're figuring out our ways around them. And so whether this world of George H. Sorter and the ability to give people the underlying details and the reports, but give them the underlying details and services and standardize it so that you can get what you want, use your values, use your estimates, know what management says, but be able to apply your filters as well. Not too long ago, the US government said, put something called the Data Act, and they said, we want to be able to get the right kinds of data, but not just the data we know about, the reports we know about. We want to be able to get timely, reliable, secure, and consumable data, even though the future users and uses cannot be predicted. We want to grab all the data now for some use that we don't know about in the future. Okay? And that this is going to be a public good. I call this plenoptic reporting, based on a series of cameras, light ray cameras, and you take a picture. And you don't focus. You just take the picture because it's not taking pixels, it's taking the light rays. And then you can focus it in the future. You can change the perspective in the future because you have all the information that you need and not just one view. So, accounting, management accounting, unlimited reporting with people who don't know it, real time at the events level, let's add real time. And again, what better place than to sit on this stage to talk about continuous monitoring and reporting and auditing, because this is the home. Back in 2002, the SEC was saying we need to be moving to a system of unquestionably material information in dynamic models with current disclosure. And they came out with Sarbanes-Oxley in section 409, saying that there was going to be a new real-time issue requirement. They changed some things a little bit, but people have been saying we need to get information as quickly as possible for people to make the best decisions. So we need to streamline, we need to standardize, we need to protect the data, we need to store stuff, even if we don't know we're going to need it, or be able to link to it so we can get it, summarize it so people can know what management says, but provide the details so people can apply their own filters, get rid of all the unnecessary friction while you preserve confidentiality, recognize risk and rewards, deal with probability, deal with materiality, enable all the participants, but figure out how today's techniques and methods are relevant and what's going to take for us to move to the future. So that's a little bit about our environment. And to deal with some of these issues, along came XBRL. And as Rod said, there were four of us back in the beginning, sometimes called the forefathers of XBRL. The person who started this all, a guy named Charlie Hoffman, who said we need to take financial statements and we need to be able to take XML tags and put them behind the scenes of those financial statements, because that's where the world was going to go. And if the accounting and audit profession did not do that, we would find ourselves disintermediated. And so he got in touch with a gentleman then at Great Plains Accounting Software named Wayne Harding and said to them, we've got to do something about this. He was working with Great Plains Accounting Software. Wayne and Charlie went to the AICPA, started to get some gears going. Wayne and I met in October of 1998, and Wayne said, Eric, I'm working with this gentleman named Charlie Hoffman, and I think that this is going to change the way our profession runs. And so I brought in my vision. I have been working with people with their accounting systems for many, many, many years. Back when accounting software was not user-friendly, you were lucky if it was user-tolerable. You'd hit the escape key and you'd wind up at a business basic prompt, you'd lean on the keyboard and you'd corrupt your data files. It was a fun time. But my goal was to make it so that the underlying detail could be integrated so that you could migrate from an old system to a new system, so that you could archive the information for later use even if the standards change. And so Wayne and Charlie and I worked with the AICPA to begin the XBRL movement. And again, the AICPA has a nice little document called The Story of Our New Language, available off their website, that talks about the history from Charlie and Louis Mathern's vision. Charlie's goal was to standardize the financial statement. I wanted more. I wanted to be able to standardize the underlying detail so that you can have many views from that. And other people came along to develop this vision, that a piece of business information coming in from any place, from your business trade, internal operations, involving internal auditors, external auditors, regulators and administrators, FDIC, SEC, tax regulators, and others. The companies, their investors, banks, publishers, software vendors, and service providers, so that they can all benefit from a new internal environment made more efficient with XBRL. And then we'd just be able to standardize one lifeblood, or at least one syntax, which has been coming to a little bit of a change. One syntax from first business operation to internal reporting, preparation for external reporting, and then use on the outside. And two primary worlds, the world of XBRL, financial reporting, the more familiar world. But it's not just financial reporting. Financial statements and tax returns and sustainability and bank call reports, and used around the world. And then XBRL GL to be the detail and the link from incoming transactions to external reporting. So why did we decide to go with the XBRL approach? Now, I've written some text. You have, as you're sitting there with your first job, someone puts this piece of paper down in front of you and said, execute this instruction. How many people can execute that instruction today? That one. Okay, so we've got one person. So again, please do not look as I try and pronounce this. My apologies. Пожалуйста, пошлите 5000 американских долларов моему банку в Калифорнии 10 декабря 2017 года. Close?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I pronounced it for you, which does add context. Does anybody else in the room know what that says? Okay, well now you have a helper. Or you put it into Google Translate, and Google Translate says this. Please send that number, that currency to my bank in that area on that date. Do we know exactly what to do at this point? Are we in better shape? Okay, I see some heads saying yes. Okay, what if I told you that this instruction came from a Russian speaker in Montreal, Canada? Does that change your mind? Okay, well, let's sort of parse it out here. What are the problems? Why am I telling you that you do not yet know what you should do? Does anybody know? What's ambiguous here?
We don't know which bank it is.
Okay, so my bank, unambiguous. Excellent, that's one. Give me another.
It says it's to my bank account, that's maybe it's not business, or we don't know it's personal or business.
Okay, personal bank account. Okay, great. How about another one? And it's going to be far more fundamental.
We don't know if it's US dollars or.
Okay, having said that, it could be Montreal, it could be Canadian dollars, it could be US dollars, it could be Fijian dollars, it could be.
It says
New Zealand
American, it says American dollars.
Okay, so the folks who had the. So we got a little bit more context here. Okay, keep going, there's two really big other ones. Okay, CA. Okay, great. What do we think CA is? In the United States, we think it's California. In Montreal, it's my bank in Canada.
Oh, the date could be.
Okay, the date. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Here in the Russian, a little bit more clear. Here, ambiguous. We'll talk about that. I need another really glaring one.
You don't know how to wire the money?
Okay, how to wire the money, that's a good one.
Into the wire or something like that, I guess.
Well, why don't we go ahead, by the way, down here in the bottom, ISO 639 is a language code. ISO 3166 is a region code. ISO 4127 is a monetary code, and ISO 8601 is a way to format dates. Does anyone here, any math nerds, by the way, I've got a math degree, know what Pi Day is? Are you familiar with Pi Day?
Is it, I'm guessing, is it March 14th?
March 14th, okay. And why do people in the United States, why can we celebrate Pi Day, but people in Europe can't celebrate Pi Day?
No, they switch it.
Because they would have 314 would either be the third day of the 14th month, which,
Right.
or the 31st day of the fourth month, and that doesn't work either. So they have to approximate with something else. Okay, so let's parse this out. Number one, language, as we've seen, we've got someone who helped us that. Please send, that's ambiguous. 5,000. In the United States, that's the number 5,000. In Montreal, that could be the number 5. In continental Europe, that is the number 5, because the comma is the decimal point in many other places. We have ambiguities between the thousand separator and the decimal point. Dollars, US, Canadian, Australian, Fijian. The bank on the day, do we send it on that day? Do we wait until that day to figure out what the bank is? Is CA California, Canada, Central America, Catalonia? Is 12/10 October 12th or December 10th? So these are just some of the things that make it very difficult in an international environment to share data. In terms of the 1,000 separators, just so you know, in the Nordic countries, no 1,000 separator comma for the decimal point, except for Norway, where the period is the 1,000 separator and the comma is the decimal point. In the United States, commas is 1,000 separators, periods is decimal points. In India, they don't use the 333. They use a 22223 format. And so when you look at numbers, okay, so we have problems with dates, we have problems with numbers, we have problems with places. Is that a hindrance to us sharing information? Yes. All right. And talk about numbers. So coming up in November in Paris is the next XBRL International Conference. And I have had the opportunity over the years to travel to many different places. The Gulf Coast countries are a place where XBRL has been in some use. And so what are these things over here on the right-hand side? This is called audience participation. What are these things on the right-hand side? Numbers, excellent.
Smart group.
What are these things on the right-hand side? Those are numbers. Those are numbers. Those are the numbers that if you go to Dubai or Abu Dhabi or the Gulf Coast countries and you get in a taxi and they say, Mr. Cohen, you owe this. And I say, okay, well, that's a decimal point, that's a 1, that's a backward 7, that's a bigger backward 7, that's a backward 3, a 0, forward 7, Beethoven's 5th, play it backwards, and a 9. So we can't even agree on numbers sometimes when we're trying to do it. So XML is a tool that helps us to start to bridge that. And some things that we use, XML, namespaces, schema, Xlink, help us take care of dates. We use the ISO 8601 format. Year, dash, month, dash, day. Numbers, you use the period as the decimal point, no 1,000 separator, no spaces. Even the CSV files, files saved from Excel, CSV in the United States. Who knows what CSV stands for? Comma separated value. And why do comma separated values not work in Europe? Because the comma is the decimal point. And so they use the semicolon separated value. Semicolon? So even CSVs are not transferable between countries. So XBRL says, let's deal with these things that are common. And so let's come up with our agreement on syntax, ISO 4217 currency codes, ISO 8601 date codes. But even then, that's some of the technical issues, but it doesn't help us with full context. And we expand, we bring in additional standards. So context is important. How long does it take to drive from Paris to London? Does anyone want to ask which Paris and London? Anyone here from Texas? There's a Paris and London in Texas. It's right there around Fort Worth. You go through Fort Worth from London, Texas to Paris, Texas, around 6 hours and 7 minutes. I live in upstate New York, glorious tropical Rochester, New York, and not far from me is Paris and London, Ontario, Canada. And that's just a mere 56 minutes to drive from London. And then, yeah, there's the one with all the water and stuff. And again, that's around 5 hours, and you have to swim a little bit. But you have to know the context. So it's all about the context. And let me ask you a question. What do you think of when I say the word mercury? And by the way, I'm going to let you guys, I'm sorry to keep going at you here. What comes to your mind when I say mercury? Okay, the planet. Which one?
Mercury.
On a scale from 1 to 8.
And on a scale from like how far?
Is Mercury the first one, the last one?
I think it's one of the closer ones.
It's the closer, yeah,
It's
right.
the closest one to the sun, right?
Excellent. It is the closest to the sun. Sorry, I was also an astronomy major. Mercury, what does Mercury mean to you? Okay, the car. That's excellent. I don't get that a lot. Perfect. What does a mercury mean to you? Okay, well, the stuff in the thermometer. And what's the chemical symbol? Hg. What does mercury mean to you?
I was thinking the same.
Okay. Anyone have another Mercury? Freddie Mercury. We will rock you, we are the champions. Excellent. And where did Freddie Mercury, where's there a statue of Freddie Mercury? Where does he have his, where were his studios? Where's there a statue of Freddie Mercury?
England?
Oh, not that you're closer than here, but I'll give you a clue. It's mentioned, you know the song Smoke on the Water?
Yeah.
One of the most famous guitar riffs of all time. Dun, 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 dun. Right, Deep Purple. By the way, there's a Deep Purple memorial right now next to Freddie
Oh, really?
Mercury. What was the song Smoke on the Water about?
I have no idea.
Because if you know the first sentence of the song, you know where the statue is. We all went down to Montreux, Switzerland. We all went down there. Deep Purple was recording an album in Montreux, Switzerland. They hadn't quite finished. They went to dinner. While they were out eating dinner, they looked out at gorgeous Lake Geneva, and they saw smoke coming across the lake. They said, I wonder what that was. Another singer named Frank Zappa and his group, the Mothers of Invention, had a concert in the same hotel. An idiot who was in, one of their spectators had brought a flare gun with him, which he shut off inside of the hotel, burning the building down, Smoke on the Water. That's what the song is about. Montreux, Switzerland is where you're going to find Freddie. Any other Mercuries here? Okay, let's see how we did. The planet, the god from whom the planet is named, the metal, the car, Mercury, the first band, U.S. space. John Glenn went up, and then a whole lot later he went up again and left the turn signal on the entire time. The record label, you remember records, San Jose Mercury News, Mercury Speedboats, Mercury Computer Systems, the Women's National Basketball Association, Mercury, which is from what city? In 17 years, only 2 people have ever gotten this one right. They were the women's national champions 3 years ago. It is the Phoenix Mercury. You can find out more by going to www.nba.com. Let's see, Mercury Publishing, Mercury Insurance, Freddie, thank you very much. The Mercury Hotel chain, if you're European. The Mercury Theater, the Air, Orson Welles, who scared everybody with War of the Worlds. Okay, so even with something that you might think is explicit as Mercury, we need context to get going. How do we begin to add context? We find information. Someone says, let's figure out how to put angle brackets around that information to provide context. This information is what? Some personal information. Okay. Would you call it an address? You might, except most of the time we don't have people's birthdays in their address. That would get it there. What is this? The phone number. How do you know that's a phone number? Because it looks like a phone number. Not in Europe, not in England, where it's +44, 0 in brackets, happy faces, emoticons, and eventually you dial it. But that's what something, when we have the context in the United States, is this how addresses are formatted around the world? Name, street, no. Some places they put the least specific stuff up at the top and the names down at the bottom. But if we can take angle brackets and put it around here, then we can say this is someone's name, this is someone's address, which is made up of different pieces. Here's a phone, an area code, and the main number, and a country code. Here's a birth date. And we begin to provide context to go along with the content. We call that metadata. That's how we begin to bring meaning to information. It's how we begin to provide this centralized way to express information. And we use things like ISO 8601 and other additional standards to help us with that. So XML helps to communicate context. It lets us provide new types of tests to bring data quality. Do you have the pieces you need? We're business people here. Let's talk about an important business. Let's talk about a financial statement. A company is reporting its sales, a US-based company is reporting its sales revenue for the year. What is a reasonable value for a large company to report its sales revenue for the year? A reasonable number. Is $1 a reasonable number for a large company for its sales revenue for the year? Probably not reasonable. Is it completely unreasonable? Not necessarily. But how about 10 million? Is that a reasonable number for a large company? How about 10 billion? Is that a reasonable number? That's the Walmarts of the world. How about $10 trillion? Is that reasonable? Is it possible? Depends on how good the next iPhone is. How about 10 quintillion dollars? That's 9 zeros after a billion. Probably not. Just to let you know, in the XBRL filings to the SEC, there have been companies that have mistakenly reported their numbers in the quintillions of dollars. Because they used software that added 9 zeros, and then they added 9 zeros, they didn't know what they were doing. Okay. What is even less reasonable than 10 quintillion dollars for a sales number? How about my sales this year were Rod, and my sales the prior year were Eric? That makes no sense at all. XML lets us start to make sure that numbers are numbers, dates are dates, text is text, and things like that. So we can test, we can improve the quality, we can look at versions, we can render it, we can extend it. And now there's some other formats out there. You're going to hear most of our developer community say everything should be in JSON. They love JSON. JSON is a great format, Java-based format, especially for exchanging information on the web, but JSON doesn't necessarily help with data quality. JSON doesn't have it wasn't really created to do what XML with XML schema is supposed to do. CSV, OWL, RDF, semantic web, so there's other formats, and XBRL, in the ways that it's changing things, has just introduced XBRL CSV. They're coming up with XBRL JSON. They're coming up with ways to use these tools, but still get the benefits of XBRL. But XBRL came together to develop a standard machine-readable. People can already read. Let's come up with a machine-readable language to enhance the communication of business information in a broad sense. And again, one of its best known is to enable more efficient corporate reporting, consumption and analysis by participants in that business reporting supply chain. Managers, investors, analysts, creditors, regulators, and accountants. Don't hit the blank, hit the next. So, XBRL has been adopted globally. In the United States, 10,000 companies required by the US SEC to provide their financial statement information using XBRL starting in 2009. This year, for fiscal year ends ending after 12/15 of this year, IFRS filers to the US. Around 800 to 1,200 will be joining again for the first time. From the beginning, XBRL Geo, which we'll talk more about for the detailed information, how to make it so that whether you're using SAP or Oracle or PeopleSoft or JD Edwards or Lawson or QuickBooks or Great Plains, that you can exchange the information between them. XBRL has developed specifications to make this all possible. They brought people together to develop the taxonomies, the agreed upon words that go inside of angle brackets and how they interrelate. Have brought together people to collaborate, have developed best practices, worked on implementations, and developed data. Those of you who are keeping track of what's going on in the XBRL world, the base specification has remained largely unchanged over the last 10 years. Something called Dimensions came in, and that's being used by the SEC and others to provide more formalization around business segments and other multi-dimensional information. XBRL Formula lets you apply business rules. Very important. And as we'll talk about the role of XBRL in blockchain, it's not just about the data, it's how data works with each other, how something can turn into something else, how they interrelate, how you can check them for quality. Versioning, rendering with inline XBRL. A big change coming up in the United States is that those 10,000 companies that have been providing XBRL the old way, there will be in the next few months, with all likelihood, a rule. The proposed rule's been out since March. There will be a rule saying that every company must move to a new format called inline XBRL, where the XBRL goodness is now right inside of the HTML file, at least a lot of it. Enumerations, this open information model with JSON and CSV so that you can be using stuff other than basic XML. units and other specifications, and they continue to work on that. XBureau has also looked at other developments to try and figure out what's going on. One of them deals with the identity of organizations, and something called the legal entity identifier, something that came in with Dodd-Frank to deal with the problems of derivatives when you take a company and you sell little bits of it and other things and sell little bits of it and mix and mash and merge them together and sell that. How do you keep track of these things? Came up with the idea of the legal entity identifier, sort of like an IP address, sort of like a unique serial number. The legal entity identifier is this big long thing that lets you uniquely identify an organization. Because the other different routines that we have, things like a stock ticker symbol, stock ticker symbols aren't one symbol and they don't change. If you forget to file something, you have to temporarily change your stock ticker symbol. You may have multiple stock ticker symbols for different types of stock. It is not unambiguous. Or different rating agencies may have numbers. Or the SEC gives you CIK, but the IRS gives you a tax ID. So how do you come up with a digital identity that is unique and non-ambiguous and neutral to purpose or regulator and authenticatable and a public good? And so people have been working on this thing called the legal entity identifier. It's been really growing around the world, and when you go to an XBureau file in the future, you will find a unique number. It'll be a lot easier for you to do your research. And it's overseen by a group called the GLEIF, and there's people coming up with ontological approaches with GLEIO, which is not Old MacDonald and his farm. So legal entity identifier, a big thing coming up with the XBureau community. The syntax independence with JSON and CSV. Blockchain. And Rod asked me to come and speak about how XBureau has been working with blockchain, and that is a non-trivial answer. It's a non-trivial question, non-trivial answer. So I'm going to just muse for a second while I take a glass of water. Talk amongst yourself quietly. Good job. So, XBureau US. XBureau has its international presence called XBureau International. It has a regional presence in the United States, XBureau US. And XBureau US has been working with various groups. In particular, there's a vendor which is very active in the accounting and audit space. They've been trying to figure out how can they work together, and in particular, how do we take the tokens that are exchanged using the blockchain transactions, how do we associate some XBureau content with that to provide additional contextual information. They've talked about starting a new committee. I have not seen that committee begin, but a new external group, the Accounting Blockchain Consortium, is supposed to be announced sometime in the next month or so. And again, XBureau US involved. I have been told that the American Institute of CPAs will be involved. I cannot necessarily verify that, and so I apologize, AICPA, if I'm speaking out of town, just saying what I've heard, and others. So whether it's going to be part of XBureau US, whether it's going to be an independent group, whether it will be both, those are all things that should be announced very soon. XBureau International has also been having lots of different discussions with various blockchain folks. They've been talking about using blockchain as part of VLEI. So bringing together those things to work together to provide trustable identity. They had many different presentations at their conference last year, the Data Amplified conference. One of the case studies that they talked about is trying to encourage various regulators and others in charge of compliance to use blockchain to be the mediator. Someone goes to file a compliance report. They don't do it on time, they do it wrong. The smart contracts kick in, automatically take resources to help pay it off. Whether that is a reality or not is a very different question. Because that's going to require a big change in the way that we do accounting. That's going to be a big change in the way compliance takes part. We talked about the FDIC before, and how since 2005, the FDIC and FFIEC and others, working together in a central data repository, have been receiving files called call reports. And why were they called call reports? And this is their story. There was a requirement that you got in your bank report on time. There was no requirement that it be correct. Now, if you had to turn in your homework or did tests, and it had to be on time, but it didn't have to be correct, would that change the way that you did your work? Maybe. And so they would receive the reports, and they had hundreds of people waiting by to call the company and say, okay, let's go over your report. And that's why they were called the call reports, because they would get a report, they'd make a call. And the numbers back then were that 1/3 of the reports came in usable, 2/3 of the reports they'd have to call back. And the first month they implemented XBRL using things like the formulas to provide the rules and the checks. That number went down to less than 5% required a call back at the very beginning, and they've been taking advantage of those business rules. So it'll be interesting to see how the blockchain can help figure out all of this as well. So smart contracts to mediate compliance, but many other discussions in a compliance environment and in the providing the context for the tokens. But XBRL International also looking at things like artificial intelligence, big data, providing additional information, and then one of the additional roles that I played was that of security. How do we make it so that information can be available in a public environment, but only expose itself, only unfold to the right audiences at the right time? And that's part of my story that we're going to be talking about later. The black box of information, where all of the business's information is going in to the blockchain and related linked things, so that externally, objectively, you can see everything, but only if you have the right number of bars on your shoulders or the right keys or the right way to unlock it, while remaining secure for everyone else, because we don't want to expose everything. We want the right information to the right people at the right time. So that's what XBRL has been looking at, but again, what is XBRL? It's been likened to these standardized things. It's been likened to the barcode, where we're taking information and we're making it automatable. It's like the USB, where you can just plug things in and they'll talk to each other. It's like a bridge spanning gaps. It's like a weight system. It's like the standardized shipping container that revolutionized the way that business did business and changed the fortunes of city. Because today's reports have been likened to these. Ron, does this look like your basement by any chance?
Yeah.
This is my basement. And I'm still trying to figure out, do I throw away all this stuff? I've got all of these. I got my click drives. I got my iOmegas. I got my floppies. Well, we got my 3.5s. I think I gave up on the 5 1/4s. Just obsolete. This is what's going to happen to our world. This is what's already happening to the world of accounting and audit. And XBRL says, let's just capture all of that stuff, the interrelationships, the knowledge, how things interrelate, the links to authoritative literature, ways to present it to different people. So cash or Roshita equivalente, or now there's some other people in the room I think can read that one, but I'm not even going to begin on that one. We'll get back to that. But the big X of XBRL is about extensibility. So that when you share with other people, there's common understanding, but then you can say, in an object-oriented kind of approach, we're just like that, but this is how we're different. So it's about extensibility by design, and that is unique across all frameworks. And so people came together and developed their financial statements and statutory filings and tax filings, and completely revolutionized the way that their entire governments work together. And XBRL GL, and governance, risk and control, and natural capital and corporate responsibility and sustainability. And in the United States, the Financial Accounting Standards Board oversees the US GAAP, Financial Reporting Taxonomy, and the IFRS Foundation, IASB, does IFRS, and like I say, the other big change, 800 plus companies now having to use the IFRS taxonomy and reporting to the US SEC. But these references as we get towards the end, I'm going to talk about my library's life cycle. Legislation, instruction, business reporting, assurance, research, interpretation, evaluation, synthesis, where we can completely change the way that all business reporting, compliance reporting, assurance, how they all communicate, how they can all feed, how they can all update each other. And both the FASB and the ISB today incorporate XBRL into their standards, trying to move that back up into legislature so that you know where the requirements come from, can provide feedback. That's going to change. The labels take us into this world. Okay, so I know we've got some people who are going to do better than I do. Here's sort of the vision for XBRL. Here's the vision of XBRL GL, that across languages, across file formats, across stated definitions, we're going to be able to look at any system without changing the system and be able to work with it. Integration, archival, data migration, data consolidation, audit. Here is a fairly simple file. It's got an account pound, a description, an amount, and a post date. What kind of file are we looking at, auditors, accountants? So I assume the first thing is like an account number. What sort of things have account numbers? Okay, journal entries have account numbers, and invoices may have journal accounts, they'll have customer accounts, vendor accounts, cash accounts, lots of account things. So we know something with an account. Description, that may be the description of the account, it may be a description of the entry. Amount, presumably that's some kind of a monetary amount. And post date, maybe that's the date something was posted, or maybe that's what they did after their time with Sally last night. Could be anything. Accountant Sally, same as last year. You remember that one? You guys good? Do you know all the acronyms? You know inventory? What's LIFO? What's LIFO? Last in, first out. What's FIFO? First in, first out. Good. What's NINO? That's never in, never out. Right. What's LAFO? LAFO? Let the auditors find out. Okay, just want to find out where you are. Okay. I think we're going to have some people here who, can someone pronounce that for me? Is that pronounceable? Is it right? Am I making things up? Has someone been fooling me? Does that say kick me, I'm stupid? No one can read that? Okay. Well, that's interesting. Does anybody know what those four things might be? We're smart. I bet it's the same as those four, but in another language. Okay. How about this one? Any Spanish speakers in the room? Okay. Okay, so don't look. Identificador de la cuenta. The identifier of the account. Descripción principal de la cuenta. The primary description of the account. Monto monetario. The Spanish game show host of Let's Make a Deal? Or the monetary amount. Fecha de asignación ingreso. I think that was my appetizer and coffee last night. But once again, it's these four things, okay? And then we sit here and we can figure things out. But if we can automate this, if we can put on our XBRL colored glasses and look behind the scenes so that without changing anything, you see one face to the information. You see that account number would be known as account main ID, description as account main description amount. Then you can find it, you can audit it, you can build into the tools to your ACO, your IDEA, your audit tools, you can integrate it. That's what it's all about. And that's what XBRL GL was all about. Let me stop for a minute again. Any questions so far?
Anybody?
Is this good? Is this right? We're on track here? All right. So the goal is if we can bring people together to agree on semantics, maybe some wonderful things can happen. And they don't have to be perfect, as long as we can get a solution in an environment that meets our needs. The story goes of a large panda bear that goes to visit the Chinese restaurant in downtown Newark. Goes in, sits down, orders a lovely meal, compliments the chef, leaves a very large tip, goes to the door, pulls out an Uzi, just shoots up the place. Doesn't hurt anybody, but the fish tank, unfortunately, the fish tank, the lanterns, the artwork, runs out in the street, calls an Uber. They're just like that. Tries to hightail out of town, but they get him. Bring him before the judge. Give him a court-appointed attorney. Say, sir, we're going to be throwing the book at your client. He says, you can't do that. What do you mean we can't do that? Because my client was acting on innate behavior. You're saying your client, the panda, was just doing what comes naturally? Absolutely. Textbook. Your client, a panda bear who stopped up at a Chinese restaurant, ate a lovely meal, complimented the chef, left a big tip, went to the door, shut the place up, tried to hightail it out of town, and you're saying it just did what panda bears do. Absolutely, look it up. Said, bailiff, bring me a dictionary. Brought him the dictionary, turned to panda bear, where it says, bear of Chinese descent, eats, shoots, and leaves. Question?
So you mentioned that the XBRL financial statements under US GAAP standards, but how about other international, other countries who doesn't use that?
So the FASB has developed the US GAAP taxonomy, and in other places that want to follow US GAAP, all the ones that I have seen that happen, they're using the FASB developed taxonomy. The FASB develops it, the US Security and Exchange Commission supports it, so any place else in a country that provides a report to the US SEC must use the FASB's taxonomy for US GAAP. Other countries also using US GAAP will take the US GAAP taxonomy and either use it as is or make some alterations to it. However, in most other countries, they're using IFRS rather than US GAAP. And in that case, the ISB or the IFRS Foundation, they have developed their taxonomy. And more than I've seen the US GAAP taxonomy developed by the FASB being used, the IFRS taxonomy developed by the IFRS Foundation is in use in many different countries around the world. Some use it just stock. Some have taken versions of it and they've modified it. Some have taken terms from it and put it into their own taxonomy. But the IFRS taxonomy itself is being used in Mexico, it's being used in dozens of compliances, if not more than that. And the IFRS taxonomy, as published, will be used by companies, those 800 to 1,200, who are going to be reporting to the SEC and IFRS. Other countries have developed their own taxonomies. Either the government did it or in a consortium base. But so many countries are moving to IFRS, like Canada had a Canadian GAAP taxonomy. They adopted IFRS. The IFRS Foundation has big IFRS, little IFRS. So some countries still have their own adaptation of the IFRS taxonomy or are using the IFRS taxonomy. Thank you. So XBRL GL, and again, as we move towards the blockchain, we're moving to the thing that I've been promoting. We're going to take the syntax of XBRL, which, like I say, we're going to be able to pull off that piece and use XBRL JSON, XBRL CSV, and then the semantics of ERP systems, those come together to develop XBRL GL. I call it sometimes the human genome project for ERP. We looked at a lot of ERP systems, starting off with their general ledger, moving up into the base modules of receivables, payables, payroll, inventory, fixed assets, moving into the operational areas of order entry, sales, purchasing, with goals of moving. We're going to take all the different things that you need to represent the files in these systems, and we can do that in a standardized, generic, holistic, and standard way using something called XBRL GL. So it is a framework that can be used to represent underlying detail of all kinds, from first transaction at the line item level to the summarization to our end reporting. It is part of this broader world of XBRL, but it is not bound by it. It is being used in places where FAR is not used. It is an evolving generic representation of information in ERP system based on XML, although it can also be CSV and other formats. And it serves as a bridge from transactions to end report. In the blockchain world, it can be used to carry the payload that a transaction represents. If we have different blockchains with different types of transactions, you've got a Bitcoin blockchain, an Ethereum blockchain, I think it's not Aeroflot, but I know that a Russian airline has just started to do a lot of stuff and doing the boarding passes and things with blockchain. We're going to be able to span all those using XBRL and extensions to be able to represent that underlying content. It is our bridge. Openly developed, XML-based, holistic, generic, XBRL compliant, but does something that nothing else does, which is it's able to reconcile between different types of reporting. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but it is about establishing a seamless audit trail. And we're going to talk about audit trails because that's something that, as auditors, we have seen lost and will be very helpful to help us cope with a new environment. It is a bridge between systems, but it does not necessarily have to be from beginning to end, but it can fill in anywhere. In larger environments, they began to use something called data warehouses. Have you learned about data warehouses? So we're going to take certain things, we're going to make it easier to query, we're going to summarize information, we're going to aggregate it, but it means that you can move from detail to summary, but you can't move from summary back to detail. An important part of auditing is moving from summary back to detail. Important part of auditing is to be able to show, here's the underlying numbers that agree to or reconcile to the end report. Data warehouses don't enable that, and so a tool like XBRL is going to be able to help us establish that. Will blockchain help us establish that? We'll look at part of that picture. I will not bore you. I will bore you, but I won't bore you with the details of XBRL. These slides will be available for your later use. It has been built to say we want to be able to provide every little bit of XBRL with serial numbers. We want to be able to say that they relate to something else, either updating that old thing or supplementing it. We want to talk about systems coming and going. We want to be able to deal with all the accounting, pointing to underlying documents or files, talk about end reporting, and being able to do all this to establish a seamless audit trail. One potential lifeblood within and across systems. Anywhere from the first transaction or trigger to the being put into a system, becoming part of a source, turning into the journal entries, turning into general ledger entries, going off into history, being consolidated, turning into end reports, and being able to vouch and trace back and forth. So the different documents, the different reports, the different mappings, the different setup files, master files, history files. XBRL can represent all of this content. This used to load much quicker. And then keep all the links that you need between all these different stages. And again, depending on the time, we can go back to that. There's an esteemed professor named Bill McCarthy that people know. He's got an ISO acceptance standard called the REA model, resources, events, agents. And with some inspiration, XBRL also is a way to instantiate the resources, the things that are exchanged or consumed or tracked, the different parties that are involved, in people and organizations, the documents, the entries, the links to reporting. And it is more than just numbers, it's more than just accounting. It can be quantitative, qualitative, historical, predictive, risk and controls, operational sustainability. It can provide the detail to all these things. Now, XBRL has some competition. There are other people who have wanted to play in the space. You would think that with Luca coming up in 1494 with double entry, that perhaps someone would have developed some standardized way to do this in the past. And we have no accepted central standard for this today. Here's some of the players that have been involved under the American National Standards Institute. A group called X12 had created an EDI standard for general ledger transactions. In the Netherlands, they developed a series of Dutch audit files, the Dutch Audit File Finance Seal, payroll, and others. Under the object management group, they set up some UML models and facilities for general ledger and ARAP. The open applications group, in part of their whole framework, have things for chart of accounts and journal entries. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development developed something called the SAFT, Standard Audit File for Taxation, Standard Audit File for Payroll, which has been adopted in some countries but made very proprietary. In Sweden, they have the Standard Import-Export. Under UNC-FACT, they have the chart of accounts and accounts and journals and entries. In the INTOSI, who knows what INTOSI stands for? INTOSI. In the US government, the watchdog is called the GAO, General Accounting Office. And the GAO has counterparts around the world of the folks who oversee or audit government operations. That group comes together under a central group called INTOSI, the International Organization of Supreme Auditing Institutions. I love that name. It means government auditors. And they just published in 2016 a data interface standard, but each of these is for a very specific use, for internal integration, or for financial audit, or for tax audit, or for government audit, or for Swedish audit, or for Dutch audit, or for a specific regulator. And XBRL-GL is, again, working with all of these to try and harmonize. And as a matter of fact, I have I've collaborated with them. I sat on that group. I am the developer of the 2005 version of that. I've consulted with them. I am one of two experts on that group. I wasn't involved in that, but I am involved in this ISO PC 295 audit data collection, which even as we speak today is having a meeting in Moscow. See, this is how much I wanted to be here. I could have been in Moscow today. I could have been having borscht and shav and just could have said shasur with the tea. I could have had a wonderful time. But no, I wanted to be here because this is the future. ISO PC 295. Countries around the world saying that we need to have standards for pulling information out and doing audits. We need a specification for auditors to obtain accounting data, including the content and format requirements of accounting data elements, data interface output files. 18 countries are actively participating with another 21 observing. Experts, of which I am one, working on a first draft. They had meetings in Moscow earlier this week and are updating the broader group of their status. They just found out this has been pushed off till September, I believe, and this has been pushed off to September, I think 2 years after that. But again, this is hearing this live and
Are they
progress.
promoting something other than XBRL technology, or are they just saying we need it standardized?
So they are working purely on the semantics that they believe is needed for accounting data. And then as it moves along, they're going to be working on the format requirement of the most recent draft, like the AICP audit data standards, was a text, either comma or pipe or quote or some other delimited format, XBRL-GL as a satisfaction, or some other choices. But
They're supporting XBRL-GL.
the current draft includes it. What will happen as time goes along, and people agree, you know, what they always say about committee, what a camel is a horse built by committee, however that saying goes. So whether it will survive as people continue to agree and have their own motivations is another question, but the most current draft includes XBRL-GL as one of the potential satisfactions, and that could change. That could change when the first public vetting consensus draft is exposed. That could change as feedback comes in, but that's where we are today. But again, with all of these different standards, SIE, the Dutch audit file, they tend to be region dependent. Some things like the SAFT, those are primarily for tax. We have certain things that are specifically for kind of reporting, like financial reporting or tax reporting, for a specific form, for a specific source system, And our goal of XBRL GL is to be as independent along all of these tracks. And indeed, to be able to keep track of the difference between book and tax, be able to keep track of permanent versus timing differences, and there's no other standard that's meant to be a reconciler between concurrent types of reporting. So that makes it unique for using it as a standardization arm in something like the blockchain. Okay, so let's talk about the audit trail. And I'm looking at the clock here and going back to
You're fine,
where
yeah.
we're at. Oh, no, I understand. Oh, okay, thank you. So let's talk about the audit trail. Here is an evolution. We began with sort of manual systems. We wrote things down in ledger books. They got transferred to other books. You could always find something from book to book to book. We'll look at a picture of that. We moved from writing things in books to the first modular accounting systems. This is where my career began. And again, if anyone who's trying to figure out how old I am, I began before satellites went into space. I was in high school before there were pocket calculators. I was in college before there were personal computers. And my career began with accounting systems that weren't friendly. And so this is what we use. Have you heard of something called DBase? Before Access, before DBase 3 was the database, like Lotus 123 was the spreadsheet before Excel, like WordPerfect and things like that. So we had accounting systems. And if you go back to old copies of a magazine called PC Magazine, they did these reviews of accounting systems all the time. There was a wonderful system came out called New Views. And New Views, everybody just thought it was the most wonderful thing because you didn't have these modules and it moved along the information in real time and it was really easy to use. There was just one problem. You could bring it up and just sort of highlight stuff by accident and hit the delete key and lose half your transactions. So it was a lot of fun. But we had our modular accounting systems, and then in the mid-'80s, people began to say, let's integrate with others. And I'm from gorgeous tropical Rochester, New York, where we had companies like Eastman Kodak and Xerox go to small companies and say, you will buy a computer for the first time. You will subscribe to a value-added network who's going to move the EDI between us. You will learn how to do EDI. And now all of a sudden we had information coming in and out from the outside. They came up with ERP systems, and we're going to have one instance of ERP take care of everything. And then along came the internet. So a master's degree student is probably 1995, 1996 born these days. Is that?
Yes.
What years?
87. Excellent. 87 is a good year. Yes, I wrote the first book about the internet for accountants in '95. So I was born before satellites, and they were out after I wrote my first book about the internet and its use for accounting. Lovely. Along came the internet, and all of a sudden people were doing all those things. By the way, 1987 was a great year. My son was born. Lovely. By the way, 1987 is the year that IBM came out with the PS2. How you got to do it? PS2 it. That's when we moved to 3.5-inch floppies. That's when we moved to optical media. 87 is a great year. So along came the internet, and the stuff was off somewhere, and how are we going to track this and along? But still, this managed to be legally within the corporate firewall, which meant that if someone broke in, the FBI, the geeks with the gun and the badges, they'd still be able to come along and protect you. But then it went off to the cloud. It went off, and it was beyond, and we had no clue where our data is, where the processes are happening, and now blockchain solutions may be part of this audit trail picture. And in 2012, the AICPA said, this is probably the second riskiest thing to our profession right now. Merging audit or attestation risk, auditing an electronic environment where the entities are transactions and electronic, there's no paper trail. We're in trouble, we don't know how to deal with this. So again, I've got a definition of audit trail here for you. I don't want to, and again, this idea that you can vouch, go from reported facts to their initial sources, you can trace, you can go from the economic events to the end report. How do we do that in the environment? And as auditors, we're supposed to be able to test assertions. And so this is my mnemonic, my memory device for remembering the assertions of velociraptors. Because some people say that auditors are dinosaurs.
Oh.
Use that for your next quiz. There will be a short quiz on this next period.
You should put that on the back of your book.
On the back.
That would be helpful.
All right. And so as we move forward in trying to, can the blockchain help us connect around the blockchain? Which of these things do they solve? Is the fact that you've got an event and it's recorded in the blockchain and people have agreed that event is there, does that take care of these issues here? Does it take care of the fact that something has been exchanged, but maybe there's something later that you're going to deal with? You sent out a PO, but this doesn't agree with the PO, and so maybe you want your money. Or the fact that is this for the future, is it for the past? So these are some of the filters that we think about when we work on the blockchain. This is just a picture of this messy environment where orders are exchanged with trade partners, may come into EDI or the phone or fax or email or web or paper mail or from a salesperson or through some XML message. And we say, well, blockchain is going to solve everything. Well, are we going to throw that all away and say it's all going to be electronic? And can business adapt in what time to all that? And we've got our primary ERP systems, but we've got web's cloud systems, and we've got external SaaS providers, and we've got people doing stuff outsourced. And this is within this role, and we're reporting to certain people. We're involving third parties, and we've got all these different purposes and all these folks that we're exchanging information with. And is that going to take care of this whole training? Because this is the easy life. This is how I began. A document came in the mail. You took a stamp. You put a stamp on the document. You wrote in who entered it, on what date. When you put it into the computer, here's the source journal that went with it, so that you can always trace that going forward. And then these things would go into the systems and other reports, like picking tickets and shipping notices, and these would be stapled together. And then you'd come out from that with the accounting significance, and this would go off to create the income statement. And you'd just be able to trade this thing from beginning to end. And here's the electronic world, and electronic transaction comes in, it goes into an operational system. Sorry. The electronic transactions were not developed for an audit trail. They were developed to move a piece of paper from point A to point B. That's it. It's all gone. Maybe it goes into a document management system. Maybe you can find it in your electronic system. It's all gone. So how do we reestablish that? Are we going to completely change all the processes? We're going to track the request for information and for proposals and for bids. Are we going to change the business documents? Is it all going to be something in real time? I give you this, you give me that back. Blockchain, we're done. We can make those events later. These are the things that we've been looking to deal with for years. The PCOB, which by the way says that an electronic document, to this date, the PCOB says that an electronic financial statement is not a financial statement. It is just information. If you've got a financial statement that's up in the SEC Zegger system, or a corporate website, or a corporate bulletin board system for anyone using that, or any other electronic means, the PCOB, the overseer of the audit profession, says that is not a document, that's just information. The auditor has no responsibility for that. Some changes have to be made. PCOB says to this date that paper is more reliable than electronic, because it's more difficult to establish the source, detect changes, make sure that it's authorized, because we don't know what an original is in an electronic world under normal means. So we need to be able to align more information, bring it all in. Is blockchain going to be able to supplement that? Is blockchain going to be able to replace that on its own? How do we re-establish blockchain to serve more of that as it needs to? Those are some of the questions we work on. Whoop. Next. So you've had the blockchain session, and you know that although we sometimes refer to it as the blockchain, there's not a the blockchain. There are many blockchains. But there's a Bitcoin blockchain is different than the Ethereum blockchain. The Bitcoin blockchain doesn't have smart contracts. The Ethereum blockchain has smart contracts. Other blockchains are private and public and transparent and hidden, and there's permission and permissionless. But they're supposed to be immutable, but some people have been working on how to unimmute the immutability. They're cryptographically supported. They are logs. You've got the parties that are involved through their keys, which is supposed to provide some privacy, but maybe we need identity tools or other things that'll help us to get to the right people if we need to. We've got the tokens or the assets, which may have information. Some have places for payload, some have no places for payload. Smart contracts, which I say are like the cereal grape nuts. Are you familiar with the cereal grape nuts? The interesting thing about grape nuts is that they are neither grapes nor nuts. Smart contracts are neither smart nor contracts, but they're computer programs that can help move some of those tokens or assets around. And this is what people are saying. If we have all the transactions and we've recorded them, then we can use smart contracts, summarize them, and get our reports. Is this what you've heard, Rod? Okay. So if all transactions are registered first and foremost on the blockchain, if all asset exchange was performed during tokens, life is like this. But this isn't the accounting process today, where you have to later classify and interpret and estimate and value and consolidate. And so we have to work on how do we translate into this space. And by the way, audit trail. Lost in the electronic age, I went to Google and I said, what is interest in the audit trail, and has blockchain changed the interest in audit trail? From 2004 to today, here is interest in audit trail. People don't care. I guess they've given up. So even with the introduction of blockchain, audit trail is not a point of interest. But that is not to say that there's not some wonderful things that we can do with blockchain. So I, for example, happen to love folk instruments. And these are the two things. This is my wish list. A Martin D28, not that expensive. That's the bluegrass guitar. You can get them just about anywhere. Lovely thing. Martin makes great guitars. Also had some Gibson instruments. 1920, 1921, 2, 3, 4. If you can get it with the signature of a guy named Lloyd Lohr on the inside, that is a $250,000 instrument. Do not want to have my airline kick that one around. So I love these things. And so I buy used instruments. And when you buy a used instrument, especially something that's of value, you have no clue, was it stolen? I was about to buy a lovely mandolin. It was gorgeous. And then it disappeared from the auction site. And I said, what happened? And they wouldn't tell me. But I did some research and I found out that it was a stolen mandolin. Someone had found it and they were able to return it to the right owner. But whether it's musical instruments, cars, or jewelry, the ability to know that someone actually owns that before you buy it from them, and to have the trust before you give away lots and lots of money. This is a great thing that blockchain DLT. Mad cow disease. Being able to track the animal and the farm and the seed and the grass and the food and all the things through the path. Blockchain can be some great things. Management's assertions, auditors' opinions. You know that audit firms have to go and make sure that people aren't putting their opinions on audits behind their back. The SEC goes after people. Just all sorts of lovely case studies of a company was doing great auditor's opinion, even better, great auditor's opinion, even more wonderful, great auditor's opinion, out of business. Huh. Let's go find the auditor. The auditor didn't exist. They made them up. Why doesn't the PCOB, why don't the State Board of Agencies, why don't they have this information easily available? KPMG and others have found their audit opinions on financial reports that they didn't do. Why don't we have systems that can track that? An auditor had their audit opinion on a financial statement. They went to the US government, they said, we'd like to do work for you. They said, that's great, let's do our due diligence. We run you through our system, and unfortunately, you've got one ratio that is below what we need. We can't accept you. They said, hold on 1 second, let's call our auditors. They went to the back room, printed off some, we've talked to our auditor. And they forgot to make a journal entry. Here it is, here's exactly what you need. And here's the updated auditor's report. The auditor did the audit, but they didn't audit that change. Be able to track back with the auditors that here is the hash that this belongs to. So many different ways that being able to look at this information, look at the logs, be able to put the systems together, interoperate with the State Board of Regencies and the SECs. Here's a report, who's the auditor on this. And the CPA firm, yes, that auditor is supposed to be working on that client. And management saying, this is the report that I put out, and having systems that interact. So this one, someone has developed a blockchain for guns, and they called it the Glock chain. Most of the rest of these Star Trek collectibles on the Spock chain, and Chinese restaurant reviews on the Wok chain, ministers on the Frog chain. Most of these I made up, but they could be outdated. But people are saying that if we have a solid audit trail, that will be the end of the audit profession. And a solid audit trail isn't the end of the audit profession. It's what we lost that helps us do our job. Because an audit trail is, do you know GIGO, garbage in, garbage out? A good audit trail is just a mirror. It doesn't mean the right things are happening. You put me in front of a mirror, it's not going to show someone gorgeous. It's going to be faithful. That's what we want. The audit trail is just a faithful representation of what went through. Then you need the auditors to make sure that what went on is what's supposed to go on. And a lot of people are out there saying that if we can run through a transaction, if everything is mirrored, you've got a customer, you've got a vendor. Every transaction, there's an equal and opposite transaction. Part of that is true, part of that ain't true. You have intermediaries. A life insurance agent is taking money from you, but they are not giving you, they're then going to the life insurance company. You have intermediaries. You have different people involved. You have different processes. You have different accounting methods. Big company, accrual basis. The whole company, cash basis. It is not a mirror, because this one records when cash is received or sent out. This one reports when the activity happens of economic importance. So it's not necessarily a mirror. It's not the end. And we have all this other stuff we have to bring in, because it's not just the fact that something happened. Context is important. So I used to work, I was Willy Wonka for a while. I worked at a candy factory. I had the most wonderful time. I was the controller, and I worked at the sales, and I helped, I love licorice, I love black licorice, but there was this thing called red dye number 2, which you needed to make black licorice, and then they outlawed it because it gave you cancer. And so then we were making green licorice, and green licorice doesn't look right. So I came up with some stuff to make black licorice. Had a wonderful time. But we had a situation. We had the situation that, so we sold lollipops and saltwater taffy and chocolates and all this gorgeous stuff. And when you went to a fair and they said our homemade, we were the home that it got made. And so big places, they would buy candy from us, sell it. And so we would look at our sales figures. 15,000 cases of grape lollipops, 15,000 cases of strawberry lollipops, 10,000 cases of cherry lollipops, 2 cases of clove, 1 case of horehound. Does anybody know what clove and horehound are? Clove is the stuff that they put into the Christmas ham. Horehound, I don't know that any decent human being under the age, I'm sorry, we're being recorded. Well, let's just say they're not to my taste. Now, if you were in charge of manufacturing and you saw that you made 15,000 cases of this and 10,000 cases of that, and you made 2 cases of this and you sold 1 case of that, what would your business decision probably be? Why in the world are we making those? We got to buy in the stuff, we have to work on them, let's just get rid of them. What's the problem? Because we wouldn't have sold the 10,000 and the 15,000 unless we had the 1 box and the 2 box. Because the companies that were buying us, all they wanted to deal with one vendor, and they had the sweet silver-haired lady who wanted that, and they wanted to satisfy that. We could not have sold the one without the other. Now, you may remember when you were a wee child, they came out with a camera called the Polaroid Swinger. It was an instant camera from Polaroid. It was called the Polaroid Swinger. It's more than a camera. It's almost alive. It's only $19.95. Why were they selling a $19.95 camera? So that they could sell lots and lots and lots of film. We should stop selling the camera. We're only making $19.95, and then we're making hundreds and thousands on the film. No camera, no film. I sell flavored water. And I sell plain, I sell lime, I sell orange, mandarin orange. And I decided I'm going to make lots and lots and lots of mandarin orange, and I'm going to make so much lime. And someone comes along and says, I want 10,000 lime. You say, you can have 5,000 lime. That's all I got. You want 5,000 mandarin orange to make up for it. Well, I guess so. You sell them the... Now you come, you look at your sales figure, I guess we need lots of mandarin orange, not so much of this, because we've lost the context. So it can't just be the fact we have to have the context. It's great to have the rules, it's great to have the internal policies, it's great to have workflow, it's great to have formulas, it's great to have processes. So that's where we bring together the blockchain and XBureau. So Reese's Reese's peanut butter cups. You got peanut butter in my chocolate, you got chocolate in my peanut butter. Two great tastes in one. Certs, it's two minutes in one. XBureau and blockchain. Reese's peanut butter cups and certs. We bring together the rules, the processes, and the GRC, and the laws and policies, the workflow, the electronic data, the definitions, the formats, all of the stuff, because it's got to be more than just here's a token and off you go. And we associate that. They're our channel, they're part of our security and privacy story, they're part of the identity story. We get this stuff to somehow accompany these inalterable logs. And this story is not a new one, because I gave this story in this room and in another room in this facility. And I've been talking about this for over 15 years here. Because XBureau GL, as we've said, is the means of being able to have one lifeblood from beginning to end accompanying the transactions, the subledgers, the month-end processes, the estimates, the accruals, the adjustments, the consolidations, off to the reporting process, intercompany, currency exchanges, topside adjustments, from beginning to end, and from it, have the reports that you need. That way we can do our vouching, we can do our tracing, and it's not just about the transaction, because if you have a transaction, how do you do this, drill your way back from the sales figure to the underlying content, to the mishmash that's there. So back in 2003, this is a picture that was presented in this building, or actually it was in the other building before it moved here, the downtown. This was presented to this group, to this audience. That sometime we're going to have transactions coming in through branch systems, subsystems, however they come in. That information would be turned into one lifeblood with XBureau GL. It's all going to go into a universal audit trail. And then as information moves along to reporters, as it gets posted, as it turns to external reports, anywhere along the line, you can be saying, how does this reconcile with stuff downstream? How do we have rules and monitors and triggers and alarms that can work to make this all happen? I don't believe that blockchain alone does this without this kind of help. This picture even more, the audit trail black box, where we took every type of business, we turned that into XBureau GL, we calculated the hashes, we came up with other inputs, we put that into some sort of a seamless audit trail repository. This is blockchain today. not for operations necessarily, but for the audit trail. And from this, you could integrate. From this, you could do your audit. From this, you could move off to archive. And at the time, again, I did not have a consensus mechanism as blockchain did, but I said, we're going to take this, we're going to put this in a public place. The hashes, we're going to put it off into Usenet or the New York Times Classified or other means so that you could go back and make sure that nothing's changed using the hashes at the time. That's the slide I mentioned before. It's out of place. I apologize. So these are the issues that we began to ponder. We've got tokens coming through, and you probably hear about all the billions of dollars being made by people selling tokens, so we got the tokens. Those type of tokens can represent a Bitcoin or an Ethereum or a carbon credit or physical inventory or cars or whatever it is, and they can only store so much. The blockchain people have said we don't want to have hundreds of gigabytes of payload within. So we figure out where can we put that payload that still has the open, transparent, immutable, cryptographically supported and all those benefits. And people are throwing out things like IPFS, the Interplanetary File Systems, IPLD, and other means, but we have to make sure as these things move forward that the content moves along with the audit trail if you want to be able to access this. So how do we keep the data and metadata? How do we figure out which data can be stored internal to the blockchain itself, which are going to be referenced? How do we integrate across blockchains? Are you going to start all of your audit processes from an event? We start an assertion, the reporting fact, you're going to be vouching, you're going to be tracing, relevant sets. How are we going to be able to provide assurance on this? And what kind of assurance do people want? Do they want a report? Do they want a summary? Will people still be able to provide a report? This is what management wants to say, and be able to put out that information in real time, near real time, and have the audit profession deal with this new, more rapid information. So going back to 2001 with Miklos, he and I have been working on this concept of data level assurance. The blockchain can absolutely help facilitate, where we provide variable comfort. Right now, today, an auditor provides most of the time saying that this fairly represents or this does not fairly represent. But now we're going to be able to provide different kinds of comfort about authorization and authentication and understanding the context of information. Are you familiar with the concept of going concern? You have a going concern that I want to be done in time for lunch? I don't think. Going concern. What is going concern? That's when the auditor has determined that this company may not make it. And when you have a going concern, the way that you report things is different. Because with a going concern, people want to know if the thing falls apart, what's left in the business, where is the value? So if you look at a business and you look at the financial statement today and you say, look at what they're worth this, and look at the fixed assets, look at everything. And then there's a going concern, and it's, oh, the fixed assets has tripled. Wow, that's wonderful. This company is so much more valuable than it was before, but you miss the fact that it's associated with the fact that the report is issued under a going concern, then you have missed a very important piece of context and why that information has changed. They move from LIFO to FIFO or NINO or LAFO or any of the other decisions if you don't have the appropriate information, the appropriate context, role of context. So data level assurance includes that ability to understand the context for pieces of data or groupings of data. The metadata that helps you consume the information, that those make sense. As we apply metadata tags, as we have controls in place, and technology that'll make it so that information isn't just associated with a report, with an associated auditor's report, but you can trust the information as it moves along. And again, an old picture of that as I'm looking at our timeline. And just because in an academic environment everybody loves formulas, I have a formula. There will be no quiz on this next period either. But again, as we look at the role of blockchain and audit, we consider which of these things are going to be additive, which of these things are substituted, and does the role of blockchain make any of these things actually obsolete? Because an auditor isn't just going in to look at facts, an auditor is going in to assess and talk and look at people's faces and listen to what they're saying And will the audit of tomorrow be something that's absolutely auditable, or do we need people and their knowledge and understanding of management's point of view and other things as well? So coming down, here's what we're talking about. This is what I've been talking about here for years, a fully integrated continuous process where we have things that are just ticking away, people getting involved where needed, tools taking care of things, the tools, the analytics, scheduling things as needed, doing some things if necessary, appropriate benchmarks, job management, practice management, different series of tests and rules and blockchain and things. And again, where does this feed in? This is the library's closed circuit compliance world. And again, not all reporting is compliance, but that's where a lot of the audit function is taking place. If we can make it so that when Congress, for example, in the United States, they're the people who oversee the Internal Revenue Code, not the IRS. They set the rules. The IRS, they interpret it, they come up with the forms and things. But they are not the end of the story. They come up with regulations. But if you actually want to know what Congress says, it would be great to go back to Congress. That's not what can happen today. The IRS comes up with forms and instructions. People do their reporting. Again, it could be financial statements. We provide assurance. People do their research. During the process, people need to understand, I don't understand a particular requirement. Right now, you can't go back to the legislation. Instead of going to the IRS today, you go to tax court. The tax court in the Northeast region have a completely different opinion than the tax court in the Southeast, and so they may come up with different results. But again, if we had standardized tools, if we had blockchain, if we had channels where we could just follow it back around, and at any point, we can point back to the underlying legislation or the underlying instructions, evaluate them, figure out how to change them, do our drafts, then we could revolutionize the way the compliance takes place. We could move information along and use it in new ways. So, wanting to make sure, you said we can go to 12:15. See, we're coming up to the top of the hour here, so I want to make sure we have that time. Will transactions, if you know the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain in particular, people figure out, they do their algorithms, they do their tests, they get some money, they mine the transactions so that they can add them on, and solvers get a prize if others agree. Is that someplace that accounting may have accounting puzzles where the solved puzzles get grafted onto those? Will things be immutable? How do we deal with the transparency? If you don't want people to know that you're about to enter into a new agreement with this other party, can people using some of the wonderful things out there, well, I've seen this code, and I know that code went when they had a prior transaction, even though it's a key that's not associated with them, I see it again. I know they were talking, will people be able to back their way into stuff they shouldn't, no matter how secure it is? Dealing with the audit trail and where the content can go, tracking the assets, logging the data, taking advantage of the fact that people can't game this, reducing the reliance on mediators. How will smart contracts go? How can the trust of the old world be brought in to the 50 shades of trust of the new world? I am part of a group called ISO TC 307, which is trying to develop new foundations for blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. Right now, trying to bring in the concepts of payload, the concepts of independent audit, and others into that the best I can. But it is a very exciting area. It is a foundational area. You guys are coming out just when we need you the most for this new layer. There are some problems that another expert on blockchain are going to solve for us. Again, that's how we work together. So XBRL, Geo, and the blockchain. What an exciting time to be starting. What a great group. I really appreciate this opportunity to share this with you. pass along the mantle, be part of it for a while. But know that sometime in the next 3 to 18 years, when this becomes real, we've got some great people who will know what's going on, be able to move it forward. Top of the hour, 10, 15 minutes. We can stop, let people go to lunch. Anyone who wants to stay around or stay whatever, please take it.
Well, first of all, let's give Eric a big hand. Any questions that you guys have that you want to ask them about either XBRL or blockchain or the way they're going to work together? Anybody? And I have on the line here as well. I'm looking at any of the folks online.
Not necessarily XBRL and blockchain, but about XBRL and Microsoft Excel. So much of our lives need Microsoft Excel. I'm just curious because some of those data sets are really large. Do they then get transferred to XBRL? And can XBRL easily go to Microsoft Word, or do they need to have 2 data files?
So, really interesting question again. Excel is the accountant's hammer, and that's been it from the beginning. What do they say? When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When you have Excel, everything's got to fit into it. Excel, of course, is a really, really not most suitable tool for a lot of things. Access might be better, but there have been people who have developed. Well, the very first proof of concept for XBRL was called the Excel Investor's Assistant, which was Microsoft, PwC, and NASDAQ, showing Excel as a consumption tool where the programming would bring the information in. Many, many years later, there's some great vendors out there, in particular I think of CalcBench and the XBRL analysts from a company called FinDynamics, which are made to use Excel as a front end to bring in the data from the SEC filings and other filings, either just using what management wants you to see, or you can build formulas and things and pulling the data to create your own models. The Security and Exchange Commission themselves realized that people really like Excel. So they have taken the XBRL filings that have gone to the SEC, and they have created 4 CSV files representing the labels, the data, and some of the other content. So you can just pull down those CSV files by month, by quarter. And so you can be bringing those into Excel. But the issue of XBRL, and one of the reasons that it's designed the way they are, is because information, how many different places might cash appear on a financial statement? Well, it's going to be on the balance sheet, statement of changes in working capital, cash, in the notes. And so one cash item isn't just one line necessarily, although it might be one fact, because it's got a web of places in the presentation. And Excel has just never been good at even dealing with a multi-hierarchy XML file. So again, people who like Excel, there's some great tools today that let you work with the SEC data by helping make some of those decisions for you. And other people will work on other ways to use Excel to work with this. XBRL GL, you can take an XBRL GL file, open it up in Excel. It won't understand XML schema because it doesn't understand really the multiple levels, but it will just create a flat record for everyone, and then you can do pivot tables and other things. So Excel can be a great tool for people who want to use it, but Excel is not really optimized even for the 4 files, something like Access, which can relate different things to each other a little bit better.
Good question. Others?
So you set up different models with XBRL. Does that mean like, just because I only know Excel, but does that mean like when you want to translate something, like given the example that you used, the $5,000 go to like whatever Canadian currency is, do you have to like set up a conditional for everything, or is that already within the information structure that's in XBRL?
So within the information structure, every monetary fact is explicitly associated with the monetary. And that's one of the ways that XBRL was designed, is that you will unambiguously know what organization it's involved in. You will unambiguously know the time period that the fact relates to. You will know the monetary units of measure other than monetary. They developed something called the units registry, which takes the SOI units of measure, the basic kilometers, mass and distance and things. It formalizes them. They're working on trying to expand on that so that the number of salespeople or number of warehouses or other types of descriptive units are more formalized. So, but when you use XBRL and you see a number, you know exactly what the number is. You know exactly if it is a monetary, you know exactly what the currency is with no question, because ISO 4217 says it's Canadian dollar, US dollar, Fijian dollar. And then that'll come when it flattens out in your spreadsheet.
Okay.
Eric, we have one question online here from Deepak with Libra, California. Thanks for the awesome presentation. How do you see XBRL tags to be used within the blockchain ecosystem? As in, do you see metadata supporting a TXN taxonomy in a blockchain be in an XBRL format?
So whether it's the end reporting concept, in the world of the United Nations that I mentioned that I'm part of, we have something that we're saying, which is that accounting is everywhere, which means from first transaction on, we want people to be able to associate, we even called it the accounting token many, many years ago. We want to be able to say, when this thing reaches some final accounting, this is where we think it should go to. And then at a later time, when it's actually classified, you can compare that with the original. So whether it is the equivalent of the accounting token, these are the accounting significance we see in the future, whether it's the actual accounting detail, the journal entries or pointers to other resources or things that you measure. Yes, I see anything that is not explicitly already laid out and standardized by the blockchain transaction to be XBRL GL enhanced or an external taxonomy. Either in the payload, the Ethereum blockchain has a space for payload. I don't know the limitations. I thought I had a slide here somewhere where at one point I had a slide where a single document might be 10K of payload. And is there room for 10K of XML payload within a transaction? Something that's bigger, a month-end type of report with lots and lots of detail can get up to tens or maybe even hundreds of megabytes, and that's not going to make sense to go in the payload in a particular transaction, at which point we have some sort of a hash pointing off to the IPLD or the IPFS and working on how those work together. But yes, providing the context to go along and accompany the entry in the blockchain so we have the complete picture, so that whether I as a manager or an IRS auditor or someone else can go find the entry, find the information associated with the entry, and then
So the
operate.
metadata can travel as long as it's not too huge or something.
So it could potentially travel as part of it. There's a website that I'm trying to remember now that lets you see the stuff that people have hidden inside of the Bitcoin blockchain. There's pictures of Celine Dion. There's people have put in declarations of love. They've put in, I wrote this program on this date. And that's not what the Bitcoin blockchain was for, and that's why I say they like to push back. But people have hidden all sorts of payload inside the Bitcoin blockchain for what it is useful for. But yes, payload inside or something referenced from it are options that should be explored.
Deepak, let us know if that answered your question. A follow-up on that I had was, when you tag things to a taxonomy in XBRL or XBRL GL, what kind of overhead does that add to the data? Like, for example, if I had a general ledger and then I ran it through an XBRL taxonomy and I tagged it with typical XBRL data, is it suddenly twice the size of the file or 3 times? And also a follow-up, can it be hacked? Could I hack something that already been through a taxonomy? Can I hack a tag? Could I change, EBIT into just net income? Or is it tag? I know I can run it to another taxonomy and relabel it.
Sure. So answering the first question, when the World Wide Web Consortium developed XML, they came up with what they wanted XML to do. And they wanted it to be easily read by people, and by putting the words inside of the tags, you made it easier for people to find things. But explicitly, they said that terseness was not one of the binding things within XML. And that means that whenever you start, instead of doing a pipe or a space, you start putting in things with angle brackets, and depending on the taxonomy, people come up with really, really long words inside of those. The IFRS taxonomy has one angle bracket that there's more than 256 characters just in the angle bracket, and then there's an ending angle bracket, so that's 512 characters just to tag something. XBRL is not that long, but if you look at, I did not reference the AICPA audit data standard in anything but running. The AICPA has a standard leveraging XBRL or a pipe limited format, including a base, general ledger, order to cash, procure to pay inventory, and about to come out for people to look at as fixed assets. Lets you do XBRL. When you look at a pipe delimited versus an XBRL, you're going to see that something can easily be 10 times or more in the raw. That's good and that's bad. Because it is repeating and it's a pattern. When you run it through a zip or something like that, it comes down almost to the same size. And so there's ways to do that. We have tools that will let you express XBRL and CSV instead of in XBRL, but XBRL lets you just do all sorts of things that you can't have in the other format. So just if you looked at an XBRL file that I would create compared to just the file, you might see 10 times or more because of the overhead, but it zips down and it provides value. Your second question was, can you change something?
If someone hacked into
And that's XBRL, as within the XML, is text. And so if you have access to the hard drive or the storage medium, you can change it. But that's why we created things like, I'm a named contributor to the XML encryption standard. XML encryption, XML signature, these are tools that will let people either take an XBRL file, turn it into crypto text that, I mean, if you change it, you're just changing something that can't be read, and people will know because when you unencrypt it, it'll immediately say that there's something wrong, it's not matching the hash. It will selectively unfold information as you desire. You can unfold parts, you can do multiple things in one signature, you can do parts of things in a signature. So we develop standards that can be implemented to make that happen. And again, this is, are you going to put JSON or XML unencrypted as payload, or are you going to, like, say, use a hash and have it in a protected area, or you encrypt it and put it in encrypted? These are all going to be
If you hash it on a
implementations.
blockchain, then it will be secure.
Someone may change it, but then you will know because it will no longer deliver the same fingerprint, the same hash.
Okay, other questions, anything? Anybody? Well,
Yeah, I was gonna say, you mentioned that, well, the blockchain we learned was immutable. You mentioned now that they're working on finding a way to.
Right,
I just wanted you to talk more about that.
okay, so the good news is that a blockchain by design is immutable. Once something goes in there, it cannot be changed. I mean, that's what an audit trail is supposed to be. The bad news, like I say, if you look at the Bitcoin blockchain, is that people put in pictures of Celine Dion, and they put in stuff, and people can put in things that might be a violation of someone's privacy, and should not be in there, and it is in there, and it's in there for forever. And so some people said that for a blockchain implementation to be able to be adopted by certain governments in certain places, you have to make sure that you can pull out stuff, and not just because it's an error that needs to be corrected, but that it is a violation of privacy or human rights or other things. And so people are saying we need to have a leaky immutability. And people have been working on solutions to that. But leaky immutability isn't something that I've been seeing in the mainstream. been more up for discussion. And again, if you have a permissioned versus permissionless, then you have more control over that kind of thing. If we can implement more rules, more filters, but like I say, just, I'll pass it along to you once I remember what the blockchain viewer is that lets you see the pictures and the drawings and things. Even the guy who started blockchain had a picture of Nelson Mandela that he put into the Bitcoin blockchain for the beginning. So you put wrong stuff in there, immutability, it's a blessing and a curse.
Very good. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you again, Eric. I hope this was helpful. Some of this may be on the exam, so study it up. And thank you for the folks attending on the phone and the recording and the other faculty and people that joined us remotely. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
So what are we gonna meet?